So now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about plaid for a hot minute. This is actually a really easy type of pattern to get down. The biggest thing is just making sure that you're following the fabric with your lines because it is such like a geometric pattern in a way. So that's the biggest thing. I'll give you guys 3 examples of plaid in different ways to kind of do it, different little techniques, and then we'll go in and we'll talk about putting plaid on garments. So the first version of plaid that we're going to do is just a basic gingham. That's your Dorothy Wizard of Oz, the beautiful little baby blue. And all it is really just vertical and horizontal lines. And when you're doing this, I try to make sure that I'm always pulling downward with my marker, using the chisel tip of the marker if you have one. That'll just help you create more even lines. But pulling downwards because you have more control pulling down on a marker than you do pushing outwards. And so once you get those vertical lines all set, I let them dry just for a couple minutes while I talk with my hands a lot. That's really important. Make sure you always talk with your hands a lot. And then I turn my paper sideways so that I'm still pulling downwards, so I still have that control. And then I'm going to go and make those horizontal lines that, are the same as the vertical ones, same distance. That's something else to really kind of make sure you keep in mind is the distance between your lines. After that dries for a few minutes, then we will go in, and I just like to use my marker one more time and kind of make those little center overlap intersection points just a little bit darker to kind of bring out that color, and just kind of it makes it look more gingham-y. I'm sure that that's a legit term, but that is how you do it. Look at that. Now that you guys have mastered gingham, we're going to go in and we're going to do a little bit more complex of a pattern. If you have a reference pattern for plaid that you want to use, then I would suggest kind of breaking it down like you would in the print video. But if you're just making up your own, then have a heyday with it. So for this second one, I'm going to use 2 different colors, and I'm going to use the chisel tip again and make those big fat lines, but I'm going to put them a little bit closer together. And I'm only going to do sets of 2. I'm going to put another gap between those sets of lines so that I can use the other marker a little bit later and make smaller lines. When you are doing more complex patterns, it is really important to make sure that you are spacing these out correctly and giving yourself enough room to put in those extra lines or, whatever you're doing with your plaid. I got a little bit cocky with my spacing, and that line on the right probably shouldn't be there, but I was like, well, I'll squeeze it in anyways, and then I regretted it. So just if you're kind of leery about something like the spacing, I would say just maybe hold back. It doesn't always need to be there, right? So from there, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the gingham. So I turned my paper and I'm doing the lines again, same distance, and then let that dry for a hot second. And then I'll go in with the pointed tip of this magenta marker that I have once I get it open. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to put some lines in between those big lines, that big gap. And I will just do those in between every gap. See, now I gotta try to fit the magenta line in that little awkward gap that's way too small. And I'm just so sad that I did that. But that's okay. It's a happy little accident, and it'll be okay. Once the whole thing's done, you will barely notice it. Almost. Anyways, I did the same thing, turn it sideways, and finish the lines that way. And then I'll go back and I'll make those little squares darker again, those intersection points. This really just helps bring out the plaid. I feel like it makes it look more like plaid than just weird lines together. And then I'll do the same thing with that magenta marker in the little intersections. I think that the big squares, though, are most important. I think you're necessary. The little lines are a little bit more optional. just depending on what colors you use and how much you want them to pop. Sometimes you'll see that plaid has actually a lighter color on top, and so if you want to try to mess around with this, you can use a gel pen and then make your line wherever you want it to be, and then pick up that excess with your finger. This will make it a little bit more transparent, and it will make it look like it's not just like this super like bright, obnoxious white line in your plaid, and it'll just look like a lighter value of the color that you placed it over. So in this case, when I put this gel pen down, it looks really white until I pick it up, and then it looks like a light burgundy. And then from here, if you want, if that's too bright for you, too in your face, you can always go back with that other color and just layer over it again. This will make the rest of your line look a lot darker, so I would be careful if you're already like, that's about as dark as I want her to get, then I would probably stray away from this. But if you're like, this whole line could get darker, and I'm not totally vibing with the plaid or with the white, go for it. Knock yourself out. Play around with it. Do little samples. Mess around. Make some like quick little squares, some little go-to squares. And there you go. When you want to do a plaid collection, now you have this whole array of plaid at your fingertips that you already know how to make. Boom. Beautiful. Or you can go on Pinterest and just save a ton of different plaids that you can use later on. I do that. I have a whole board of just like a bunch of different fabrics and prints and patterns that I think I'm going to use one day, and then have yet to use it. But, you know, one day it's going to come in real handy. Oh my gosh, I think that makes me a pin hoarder, doesn't it? I'm a hoarder of pins. Oh my gosh. I'm not even surprised, honestly. Third plaid. Third and final, well, almost final. And then we'll put it on the cardigan. I'm just giving you guys more examples of different plaids to use. So now we're just going to mess around with like line placement, spacing, however you want to do it. This one really ended up reminding me of like old man PJs, which is like not really the vibe I'm going for, but sometimes you don't really have a choice. And now we're just kind of stuck with it. So I'm going to tell you how to make it. So I did the same thing, used the chisel tip, made lines with big spacing because of my regrettable decision in the last one to not have enough spacing. And I'm just using the point, like the very end of the chisel tip, like just a corner of the chisel tip to create those smaller lines. And then I'll let those dry for a hot second, and then I'll add just maybe, a couple more in there. Let's spice it up. Make it complex. This is our third one. We can go crazy with it. And then from there, I will just turn it sideways like we've done before and recreate the pattern with the same amount of spacing. Gonna be really stickler about that one because I am so sad about the one that I didn't do the spacing right, and then now I just can't get over it, and I'm gonna overthink about it. And that's the artist mentality now. That's how we roll. Anyway, I'm sorry for getting sad on you guys. Oh my goodness, that's not how I'm gonna roll today. I'm in a good mood. Sun's shining. The birds are chirping. Actually, I don't live near too much wildlife. The only wildlife is Chad and Brad upstairs. But that's a voiceover for another time. In the meantime, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to go over those intersections one more time. I'm going through and I'm also going back over the lines, the little lines that are crossing over those thicker lines, just to bring that out a little bit more too. And I think you really get an idea for the what I was talking about when I said that this looks like old man flannel pajamas. because it really does look like that. And that's okay. There you go. And now we're going to put it on the cardigan. So something to just keep in mind when you guys are doing this is that if you are not turning your marker while you are drawing this, and by that I mean kind of following, the marker with the curve of the body and the curve of your garments, you might see a change in width of your lines. And so this happens kind of with both markers. With the tapered end, I notice it's a little bit less distinct than it is with the chisel tip. It's just kind of that, it gives it a little bit of a calligraphy look. That's just something, if you don't want that, that's just something to kind of keep in mind. So to fix that, you would just kind of turn the marker with your garment. You would kind of follow the line of the garment rather than just moving back and forth with your hand. So just keep that in mind, and we are going to go through and we're going to start laying in these lines in our cardigan. So I like to start with the biggest lines usually, and then try to make sure that they are all evenly spaced, as well as following the curve of your garments. So something kind of loose like a cardigan is going to have just a lot of gentle curves. And then if you have something a little bit more structured with like a lot of wrinkles or like pleating or something, then your lines are going to be a little bit sharper of a difference. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to kind of tell where you want to place those lines. And just making sure that, like I have said 3,000 times so far in this video, evenly spaced, and you just want to make sure that it's just not going like straight vertically and horizontally, because then it's going to look like you just kind of like slapped a cutout of a pattern on your garment. It's going to look like one of those like, you remember those paper dolls? Do you guys ever have those little dress up paper dolls? That's what it's going to look like, and you don't want that. You can really get an idea of what I mean by following the curve on the sleeve. So you see how I've got like all these like wrinkles around the elbow and kind of the upper arm area. So you really just follow the silhouette of those wrinkles and then just kind of take it all the way up. And something that I always kind of got caught up on when I started doing plaid was trying to fit the same number of lines in the whole like sleeve or side of the garment or wherever, but that's not how it works. If you like really look at a garment, like you'll notice that there are lines that kind of wrap around the body, and so if there's a line like that bottom line on the sleeve, you don't see that at the top. It's okay if it kind of goes out of sight. So if that's something that happens, don't try to squeeze them all in, because then your plaid's gonna look really concentrated up in the smaller areas of the garments, and then pretty spread out in the looser or wider areas of your garments. So just making sure that you kind of find some unity within your lines and accepting the fact that some of them are not going to be all the way up at the top, or the smallest part of the body. That's okay if they go out of sight. Thinking back to that idea of perspective in line, what was that, like the basic garment video with the hems? So when you are drawing your horizontal lines for your plaid, you're going to see that same kind of perspective. So the line in the middle of your garment, kind of at the waist or the hips, that's going to be straight. But from each line down or above, there's going to be some kind of angle to it because we have perspective, right? And so that's something to also help make your garments look a little bit more realistic. You are going to have some angle, some kind of arch in your plaid when you put it on the body. And so if it's below the waist, then it curves down a little bit. And then if it's above the waist, the arch will go upwards a little bit. And then you can just kind of fill it in from there. And when it's on the sleeve, your sleeve's at an angle, right? It's like it's fabric that is angled. And so your arch is going to start at the wrist, and then it's going to work its way up that sleeve and curve as the arm curves. And you're just going to do it on the other side as well. And look at that. and then you can let it dry for a hot sec. And after that, you can go in and fill in those little squares again. I really prefer doing that. I highly recommend it. Also, it's just such an easy thing to do to make your garment look like a little bit better and make your plaid look a little cooler. And then you can add some more small lines if you want. This is really where your own plaid comes into play, right? Whatever your pattern is, as long as you're repeating it and your spacing's cool, then that's all that matters. You guys really have so much freedom with this kind of thing. I mean, color, your line width, your line pattern. If you have a reference plaid that you want, you can use the pattern trick that I taught you with the palm to scale that down to your croquis size and just have a heyday with it, guys. Go have fun with it. I think plaid's a really cool thing. I think it's kind of underappreciated. It's such a sophisticated print, right? And it's just so cool how they make it. I love plaid. It's so fun. But also look at just how much cleaner it looks once you kind of go over those intersections just one more time. It just looks so good. It looks so cozy. It's such a good cozy vibe. Oh my goodness, it's so fun. I love it. And it also creates more difference in value, which adds interest to your work. That's a fun fact. Oh my gosh, we haven't done that in a while. But yeah, there's your plaid. I hope you enjoyed. Go have fun. And just, play around with it. Make some little swatches. That's what mine looks like. Do something kind of like that if you want. Do some practice rounds. Figure out what kind of plaids you like. I love gingham. Oh my gosh, I love gingham so much. It's so cute. But see what you like. Get a reference photo. Scale it down. Challenge yourself. I'm excited to see what you all come up with.